welcome back. I'm Sonia from Celestia Astrology, and we're here with your November weekly astro update for the week of the 1st to the 6th of November. And with me, I'm very grateful to say I have Shawna from Smart Astro. And Shawna's stepping in because, unfortunately, Krista was due to record for November for us, and she was affected by the flooding in North Carolina and lost her broadband, so we weren't able to record the planned dates, and now she's traveling, so it just didn't work out. So I'm so grateful that Shawna stepped up at short notice, and she's going to be with me for the whole of November. So thank you and welcome, Shawna.
Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm so grateful that you've stepped in and helped us out here.
Always happy to talk with you.
Yeah. Do you want to introduce yourself, Shawna?
Yeah, smartastro.com. I dabble a bit in Substack. I'm on Instagram, X as well, and Blue Sky is a new thing. Well, new to me. So I'm over on Blue Sky as well. Same handle in all the media. So
brilliant. Yeah, I've migrated to Blue Sky as well. So I'm sharing my work on Blue Sky and also Third House, which is a social media for astrologers in particular. So you can find lots of astrology information on there as well, but still sharing it on Instagram and Facebook. So here we have the month ahead for November, and we've got some interesting astrology happening. We've got the new moon in Scorpio, which we'll be talking about shortly. We've got Mercury entering Sagittarius, and that's interesting because it will be for quite an extended time. Before Mercury enters Sagittarius, it's going to make these trines to the outers, a trine to Neptune, trine to Mars, and a sextile to Pluto, all at the anaretic degree, while Neptune and Pluto are at 29, while Mars is at 29 of Cancer. They're going to be speaking to Neptune, so he's going to be sharing those messages from the outers with us. So that's going to be an interesting time to look out for. And then while Mercury goes into Sagittarius, quite often Mercury can travel through a sign in 2 to 3 weeks, but he's actually there quite a few months. I think I've got the dates on the next slide, but because he's going to be retrograding in Sagittarius, we're going to obviously need to get used to that energy, that fiery energy of Sagittarius. And then we've got Mars entering Leo, and again that's an extended energy that we're getting used to because Mars is going into 2025. Mars is going to be retrograding back to Cancer and then traveling back to Leo. So this is an introduction to themes that we're going to be working on through to next year, and Mars will be in shadow the whole of the time for November that we see him in Leo, because the retrograde doesn't start until December. We're going to be starting those early shadow degrees. So a lot of the things that come up while Mars is in Leo, we're going to be going back over in December. Then we have Venus entering Capricorn, like going ahead, and she's moving really fast compared to the other planets that we're looking at. Saturn will station direct in Pisces, which is again interesting because Saturn's been retrograding through Pisces, and they're gearing up for both Saturn and Neptune in early 2025 to both move into Aries almost together, which is a very significant transit for 2025. So this station direct is the beginning of that, and then Saturn will now start moving forward, meaning towards finishing up the time in Pisces, moving to Aries, although I believe it's going to be a retrograde. And then we have the big one as well, Pluto entering Aquarius. So we've had Pluto entering Aquarius before in 2023 and 2024, but this is the final time. This is going to be until 2044, I think. It's going to be there. So this is going to be for the long haul. And although it will retrograde next year, it's not going to leave Aquarius like it has before. So it's going to cover those first early degrees, but stay within Aquarius for the next 20 years of our lives. And it's saying goodbye to Pluto and Capricorn. So everything we've been working on while Pluto's been traveling through Capricorn is closing up and finishing by the 19th now. So those are the big things that are happening. And then we see that Mercury stationing retrograde right at the end of the month on the 26th. What are your thoughts on all of these big moves, Shawna?
29, 29, 29, all the anaretic degrees. We've got some potent power happening there. I feel like the community, the astrological community, has just been ablaze with all the Pluto and Aquarius stuff. So it's exciting or nerve-wracking, but I think we're about to enter something really cool. Yeah, I'm excited for it.
Yeah, it's great as fairly new astrologers to be experiencing new combinations and planets that we haven't experienced before and been able to talk about before. So I'm excited for that as well.
Yeah.
And something that we went to a speaker series yesterday. Our teacher Adam Ellenbass invites speakers on to speak, and these are open to the public, and you can find them at Nightlight Astrology. You can register and still get the recording for it. But she was talking about how when we all discuss some of these transits, we almost create an egregore, and it takes on a life of its own. So by feeding that, by discussing it. So certainly on my channel, and I know that the astrologers I work with, Shawna and Krista and Janessa, we are all about not creating like scary information, getting the headlines by saying, watch out, your life's going to totally change, because that's going to add to the anxiety. So we don't want to add to the scariness of it, but we do want to highlight to you when these big changes are happening in the sky, because there is still that feeling of as above, so below, that these are symbolic changes, that these planets don't cause these things to happen, but they symbolize that there are shifts happening in the collective. Also, our teacher, Madam Ellenbass, did a great talk this week. I'm trying to remember what it was called. It was about karmic shifts, and he was talking about Mars and Pluto making those aspects. He was talking about how that can be like a slower karmic shifting of the plates, like when you get an earthquake. Sometimes it's a sudden shock, but more often it's a slow karmic kind of the plates just moving together and a gradual erosion of the edges of each plate until a new continent is formed or a new separation is made. And that's how it occurs more often. So it's not always the headline grabbing experience of dramatic life-changing events, but quite often it's more of a gradual shift of your life going in a certain direction and becoming aware that something isn't working anymore and that a new direction is more suitable for you, and that these bigger shifts pointing you in those directions really and just showing you that way forward. I think so. Yeah, I'd certainly recommend going to those resources and checking those out if you're interested in kind of where we're coming from really on it, rather than doing those big headlines that put the fear of God into people. And then we get messages from people saying, is this true? Is this happening? What does my astrology look like? And we don't want you to feel like that. We don't want you to have that astro anxiety. And we can feel it sometimes as well when we see something's happening for us, and then it doesn't turn out to be a big disastrous thing. And it can manifest in a number of ways. And that's what we're hoping to explain to you. And the other thing to cover is that when these anaretic degrees are happening and going through from the first, second, third, and fourth, those changes is right at the time when America will be voting. And we're not actually going to be covering our opinions or the astrology of the election, but we have been following astrologers who do. And that's because we're not experts. Mundane astrology is its own separate specialism, and we haven't studied it, we haven't learned it, we're not experienced in it, so we're not going to wade into those waters. But we can highlight some astrologers who do it very, very well. One of those is S.J. Anderson 144, and he was also invited onto a panel with Lunatic Astrology, and she's a Canadian and an alumni of our Nightlight School. So they did an excellent panel where she invited a number of astrologers on and discussed the elections and their different opinions on how it might go using different astrology predictive tools. And also the astrology podcast has covered it. Lisa Shine did horary, and the astrology podcast in their forecasting gives some opinions. So these are astrologers that we respect and admire, have many, many years of experience, have years of experience with elections. So would you agree with that, Shawna?
Absolutely. I know that I'm in the States, and there's a lot of tabloid propaganda, and fear mongering around so many things right now. But the big one right now is the election, which is really coming up quickly. The ads that go back and forth. The voting period here just turns into such a negative time. It's really a struggle in that sense to decide which way you're going. But even Catherine Urban has done some really lovely, interesting talks on her past predictions for electional things, just discussing candidates' charts and things like that. And she's touched on some stuff moving ahead too. So that's a really great resource as well. But SJ is fantastic. Yeah, and they come from this same school of thought where at Nightlight, our teacher is Adam Mellenboss, and really leans into the empowerment factor as opposed to the fear mongering. So I agree with you 100%. And as someone who suffers from that social anxiety and those worries, and I've had every notification shut off since COVID, and I genuinely appreciate that and try to find a way looking ahead, not to be predictive necessarily, but if you can anticipate some things that are maybe coming down the turnpike, you can choose your way to respond to them. So that's how I like to utilize what we do.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to do here, isn't it? Give you the heads up of what the weather's going to be so that you're forewarned, but not so much that you're scared about it, but more so you can take precautions.
Yeah, your weather forecast.
Yes.
Yeah.
The astro weather. Do you need an umbrella or do you need sunscreen?
Yeah.
Right, so here we have the month ahead represented slightly differently. And here's where we can really see the difference in the speed. Because here we have Mercury traveling from Scorpio through to Sagittarius and then beginning its retrograde. And we see that the distance that Mercury's travelled there. So Scorpio being the fixed signs. So we're looking at that affecting Scorpio, Aquarius, Taurus, and Leo. And then traveling into the mutable sign of Sagittarius, which would affect Sagittarius, Pisces, Gemini, and Virgo. And then you see Venus and how much of the sky that she's transiting through. And usually Mercury would cover more than Venus. Mercury usually travels faster, so you can see how he's gone slower as he's stationing. And she's traveling from Sagittarius through into Capricorn. And Capricorn there is on the cardinal side. So that's Capricorn, Aries, Cancer, and Libra that are affected. So while we're in the cardinal signs, we then think of Mars, who's also in Cancer, and Mars leaving Cancer, which is cardinal, and moving into fixed Leo, and fixed again being Scorpio, Aquarius, Taurus, and Leo. And again, we can see how far Mars will travel into Leo, and we'll soon be reaching that stationing degree of 6 degrees. Is where it will station, but it won't quite reach it by the end of November. Then moving around the wheel, we see Jupiter is staying in Gemini, and Jupiter's a lot slower, so it doesn't cover so much of Gemini. Uranus is just retrograding there happily through Taurus, and that's Chiron there in Aries. Going back to the nodes, they've finished up their last eclipses in the Aries and Libra axis, and they're heading now towards Pisces and Virgo, where the eclipses will be next year. We have Neptune coming towards the last degrees of Pisces. And then we have Saturn, and we can see that Saturn's fairly stationary there. So he's going to be stationary, and then he'll begin to move forward next month. And then the big one, we have Pluto, and we can see it's just going to cross that line back into Aquarius. And then from here on in, we're just going to be seeing Pluto moving very, very slowly through Aquarius, and we won't see him in this Capricorn area again at all, which is a strange feeling. So these are the areas of your chart that will be affected. And like I say, even if you're not a Capricorn, it can still affect you if you're Cancer, Aries, Libra, because you'd get the square aspect of that Pluto change. And if you're a fixed sign with Pluto moving into Aquarius, the fixed signs will feel that more. So the cardinal signs will feel a relief of Pluto leaving Capricorn, while the fixed signs will feel the changes that Pluto in Aquarius wants to start making will be more strongly felt by the fixed signs being Scorpio, Aquarius, Taurus, and Leo. So what do you think of this monthly overview, Shawna?
I really, really appreciate this particular image. It really lets you see what kind of movement you can expect, how quickly things are moving versus how quickly certain planets don't move. And it shows you the ones that are going to give you that, those day-to-day experiences versus those generational or partial lifetime experiences like those outers do.
Yeah, so the personal experiences come from planets like Mercury, Venus, up to Mars. And then we get to Jupiter and Saturn. They call them the superior planets. It's because they are that bit further away. They're the other side of the sun. Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn are, whereas Mercury and Venus are closer to the Earth, like the moon is, so they can they can bring more information through to us more easily. And then these outers are the ones that weren't discovered until like the 1900s and our time. And they tend to be things that affect the collective more, and also more about our long-term things, not the day-to-day mundane experiences that we go through.
Yeah, but really those lifetime shifts that can happen,
Mm.
you know, as you grow and change as a person, it's like those, you know, those long-standing habitual changes that you start to see on a personal level versus a mundane.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you want to reflect back on what your time with Pluto in Capricorn has been and the changes, if you look back to 2008 to now and just see what has changed for you, if you know your chart, you might know what area of the chart Capricorn is in, and that gives you even more information about the house that it's in and what that house represents. That might give you more information. But generally, if you look over that time period and just think about what big shifts there's been for you, maybe in your job or your education or your relationships, your work, your family life, you know, at any of those areas, even just yourself and how you present and how you appear to people. Something between 2008 to now has fallen away and something new has come in and replaced it, most likely. And that would be your Pluto and Capricorn story. You know what mine is? It was astrology. Pluto was right on my MC when I signed up for my first certified, like proper astrology course. But it was bringing me closer and closer. Starting to look at the moon and then starting to track those cycles and starting to learn little bits and bobs and look it up. And then, yeah, finally took the plunge. And obviously I didn't know that at the time. It was through studying astrology that I realized that that's where Pluto was. And it was like, oh, I see. It actually is my Pluto and Capricorn story.
Love it.
Which is quite fun. So here's the week that we're going to be looking at in this recording. And there's a lot of astrology happening to go through. But as usual, I've chosen 3 main transits, and we'll see if Shawna agrees with the ones that I've chosen. On the first, we've got a new moon in Scorpio, and it's quite a challenged moon. We'll run through the astrology of why that is with you. And as we said on the first, second, we've got Mercury making these aspects from 29 degrees to Neptune, Mars, and Pluto. And that's before it then enters Sagittarius and begins its journey through Sagittarius. On the third, we've got Mars opposite Pluto, which is a big aspect that's been getting closer and closer over the last couple of weeks. With hindsight, maybe I should have chosen that because it's quite significant. But maybe when we look at the chart for Mercury and Sagittarius, we can take a little peek at how that looks. But that's the first of 3 aspects that Mars and Pluto are going to make. So we'll definitely be talking about it again. Venus will be opposite Jupiter, which is a lovely aspect with the 2 benefics together, even though they're a little bit challenged in an opposition. But it's always nice when the benefics meet, especially when the rest of the astrology is a bit challenging. On the 4th, we have Mars entering Leo, and then the Sun will trine Saturn. So what do you think, Shawna, of those? And did I make the right choice leaving Mars opposite Pluto out? I was always taught like these and the lunations come first.
Mars, Pluto, that's a pretty big one. There's been a lot of chatter about that too. Yeah, I don't think it's easy to pass over for sure, but it'll get some honorary mention.
Yeah.
There's no way it can't.
No, we will see that in the chart for sure. Yeah, we won't be able to miss it. So yeah, it's always, you always second guess yourself when you look at these and you have to choose 3. It's like, well, I really need 5 this week.
Yeah, it's hard to choose for sure.
Yeah, because that Venus opposite Jupiter is a good one, and even the Sun trining Saturn. I'd love to have time to talk about all of them.
Yeah. I mean, there's just 29. It's like, in my mind, it's like a casino game.
It really is.
3 29s, boom, right there. Yeah.
Again, we can see those in that Mercury ingress chart. It's all part of it, isn't it?
Yeah. There's just, that anaretic degree, it's just like a culmination point. Planets are about to either gain dignity, lose dignity. There's shifts happening when you hit that 29th degree. So it's a bit more palpable. So tends to wake things up a little bit.
To be connecting with the outers in that way is significant, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so on the 1st, it'll be at 12:47 in the UK. That's the UK timing. we've had our clocks change already now, so we're on universal time. So that's early afternoon. We've got the new moon in Scorpio, 9 degrees 35 minutes. And we find the new moon is in the bound of Venus, but it has no sight of Venus. And it's also in the triplicity of Venus with no sight of Venus. So this leaves it a little bit under-resourced, would you say? That Venus is supplying the support and the resources for the moon, but she's not able to communicate with the moon. So the moon's kind of got what it's given, if you like, and it's not able to change it or adapt it to whatever it needs. Venus has left those resources there, and it's kind of got to get on with what it's been given. The moon is in fall in Scorpio. That means that it's far away. If we look from its exaltations, on the opposite side of the chart is Taurus, where the moon is exalted. So it's far away from that place where it is exalted and celebrated. So it means that it's starting from a place of difficulty. So it has some difficulty, some challenge that it needs to face and meet. And it's how it meets that will tell how it will do. It may rise up. You can only go up once you're down. If you're in a place of exaltation, you can only fall or try and maintain that place. But if you're fallen, you can only get up. Like literally, if you trip on the pavement, you have to get up at some point, whether you're helped up by other people, which we hope, like Venus is there to help, but he can't see her, so she can't see the fall and physically help. So the moon is left kind of to its resources, but it has the sun there with it, and the sun's also peregrine. So the sun doesn't have a lot of support there. So the two of them are kind of figuring things out together, I would say. And then there are these challenging aspects as well. We see this whole sign opposition to Uranus, and Uranus is the disruptor, the just awakener, and it's also in Venus's sign. So, but it's not an exact degree aspect. So it's an energy that the moon has been used to every time it's traveled through Scorpio. We've had this Uranus throwing some shade, saying, "Sure, is this what you want?" and showing different ways that it could maybe manifest. And then we have this trine to Saturn here, and that is a degree-based trine. So Saturn, who's moving towards its station point very slowly, is looking to make things stable. I mean, you can look at the card there, how the seas are all choppy and stormy. And Saturn can bring in those lessons, wants hard work, discipline, which suits a planet in fall. You've got to work hard. But Saturn's also in this dreamy place of Pisces, which wants to spend the day daydreaming and not really work so hard. And Saturn is really, right, let's get going, let's get organized, let's get, what are you going to do about this? So there's that trine, which is a supportive element. So that's the kind of support that the moon's getting, is this kind of hard teacher coming in saying, what are you going to do? But it's bringing in some spirituality lessons, and also some sight of maybe an endless vista. Like Pisces is the depths of the ocean, like what's underneath the ocean that we can't see. So, given that they're both water signs, I feel like there's kind of things that could be revealed that we're not aware of there, because water holds memories and intuition. So with those two talking to each other, we could maybe find that things come to our awareness that we weren't aware of before, that could help us in this difficult situation, that could help the moon and the sun as they're struggling. And Saturn comes in with these lessons, but maybe it's in a form of something you weren't expecting, something that was hidden deeper in the ocean that comes to our aid. The moon is averse to Jupiter, which is the ruler of Saturn. So that's also another difficulty thrown into the mix. And then we have this whole sign trine that's coming with Mars, who's at the anaretic degree now. So again, that's a difficult degree. Mars is also in this water sign, and Mars is in its fall here in Cancer. So it's really nice to see this, what we call a grand trine of water. But sometimes you can have too much water, because water can be the emotions and the feelings. And some of these planets, Mars and Saturn, are not always designed to be in watery places, so they can struggle against it. But that can also show up really good things, lessons that they need to know, lessons that we need to know, but that come from unexpected places, I would say. So we also see this whole sign sextile to Pluto. Pluto is here, again at the anaretic degree in Capricorn. So maybe that's something to do with us finishing up in Capricorn what we need to do. So maybe these insights are just, okay, we need to finish this job up, and you've left this, pay attention to it. So if these feelings come through your dreams or through intuition or just a way that isn't the normal way that you receive information, that's really important. And we see that again because the moon is co-present with Mercury, and Mercury out from under the beams is ready to give us that information. And in Scorpio, it is about revealing those things, those deep, watery secrets that maybe haven't been so obvious to us before. And we find the moon in the first decan. And this is a really interesting decan because it's ruled by Mars, and it's in Mars by both the Chaldean, which is the system that we normally use, but also the triplicity system. So whenever a decan is ruled by the same planet in both systems, we pay even more attention. So Scorpio itself is ruled by Mars, and then the decan is ruled by Mars. So this Mars in Cancer at the anaretic degree has really got a message here that's coming through. It really wants us to take action on something that's coming through with this new moon. And astrologer Kira Ryberg has described this as hunger, and Austin Coppock calls it the jawbone. And what he's talking about here is the jaw that doesn't have a stomach that's going to tell it when it's hungry. So there's no information coming from the brain or the stomach. It's just this jawbone that's endlessly consuming. So this is about our desires. What do we really want? The Wild Way deck has given us this card showing intensity of the seal, ready and poised to go after what it wants with its spear, and it's not fazed by the waters behind it. It's not going to be scared. It's going to go for what it wants. And she's going to seek it out no matter what the cost. And she's prepared to strike. And she's asking us to think about, what are we hungry for? And how will we satisfy it? Are we ready? Are we prepared? And the intensity and the raw force of desire is what we find powerful with all this Mars energy here. But what happens if we fail? Because Mars doesn't always get it right. Mars can fight the wrong battles. And perhaps what's worse is fighting fiercely to attain what we desire, and then finding that our hunger hasn't been satisfied with this jawbone that's endlessly consuming. And that's where the potential is for disappointment. And we see that in the keywords: forceful desire, ferocious hunger, and potential for disappointment. So that's what this seal and the card and the decan is actually asking us. So we're asked to contemplate all these eventualities, and Mars is a planet that wants to take action. And maybe at this time we're being asked just to lean into our intuition and our other senses a little bit before we act, just to take our time and consider those eventualities before we just act instinctually to consume and to fight. It's represented by the tarot card, the Five of Cups. This card shows a figure standing in black by a river, and there's 5 cups, and it has 3 that are overturned in front of it that it's looking mournfully at, and then there's 2 behind that are still upturned, and we believe that they're possibly full. And this shows like how we can focus sometimes on the disappointment, and we can forget that we still have many blessings. And it's asking us to remember what those blessings are and how we can still do a lot with those. Those 2 cups are actually enough to sustain that figure and to take him forward. But while we're only focused on what we've lost or what hasn't worked, we can't actually really take action. So those are my thoughts on the moon, and I've done a full episode where I've drawn in some other thoughts, a beautiful verse from T. Susan Chang, also at how the water holds our memories and our mourning, and how it's time to mourn, but how we're also meant to carry on and endure and survive. So you can find that as well on my YouTube channel if you want to find out more about the threads of this new moon. There's a lot to it. But yeah, my main advice would be take your time, consider what action, because we do plant new seeds at a time of a new moon that can carry us forward for either a month or 6 months. There's various cycles with the new moon, but also for a 2-year cycle of a moon family. So whatever we start now can be important. And when there are these challenges of these 29-degree planets, I kind of want to get it right, whatever we start initiating now. Would you agree with that, Shawna?
Definitely. I love when you take it through the decans because it really just, it conjures up some images. Austin Coppock, with the jawbone. Immediately I started thinking of the head of the dragon, right? You've got Rahu and Ketu in that story, where it's just Rahu is the head of the dragon, has been severed from the rest of the body, which is Ketu. And it's just an insatiable hunger because you never get that full feeling. And so I think that new moon in a trine to Saturn, when Saturn is this melancholic, nostalgic, sitting in wet clothes after being caught in the rain, kind of heavy feeling, it really allows you to just kind of, even if it feels heavy, if it feels kind of yuck, you're feeling, you're not avoiding, you're feeling. And I think that's a really great lesson in that, that jawbone concept and that head of the dragon concept that doesn't have the stomach, that doesn't have the body, and in turn doesn't have the feeling. So finding yourself staying in that earthy moment of Saturn, and allowing yourself to have that earth and water mix and just feel that mud, feel the mess and feel the grit and, but the key word being feel, I think is really great. And, when I sat with this particular chart, you go straight to that water trine. And water, of course, always makes you think of feel. So we're back to that. I feel like there's something maybe dark and shadow filled, not to get too kitschy, but with this particular new moon, I feel like whatever this cycle is that's starting is going to be really not just emotive, but, when you think of that Five of Cups, if you're just focusing on the negative stuff, you forget the positive and you forget sometimes the gratitude. Right? I feel like that the weight of this one is going to bring that awareness of gratitude.
That's lovely. Yeah, you're so right with that. And that weight we see there with the anaretic degrees and Mercury also in that sextile to Pluto, just bringing that darkness out, isn't it? Mercury's ready to communicate that to us, and the moon is our translator. So it's like this information is all coming through to us now.
When you think of a new moon, I mean, when you're actually in nature and you think of a new moon, it's when it's its darkest, right? And it's when those often preyed upon animals feel safer to come out because they're not lit up, so it's when that vulnerability can kind of push forward and come out. While you were talking too, I'm staring at the intensity card. And at first, when you look at this little character, he looks like he's grinning.
Yeah.
But when you look a little closer at the eyes, it's almost like there's a challenge on his face that's kind of almost maybe even a fake it till you make it, like if I just stand my ground, if I just stay where I'm at. But then I was also drawn in by the fact that these crashing waves around him are him, her, this cute little being almost look encapsulating and almost look crown-like or blanket-like, or, like this little seal has brought those waves up himself, like he's almost Poseidon with his little trident there. I think it can be, intensity can have kind of a negative connotation, but when you're feeling that yourself, intensity and passion, I think, go hand in hand. And one of those other random thoughts that I had was really hot shower, with this water trine. I don't know about you, but for me, if I'm not feeling my best or if I had a really hard day, the water dial goes all the way to hot. You get your feet in first, you kind of get used to it. You maybe kick it back a few degrees, but there's just something cleansing and, even refreshing about that really hot, turns your skin a shade of red or pink, because it's just like that burning off of whatever you are carrying with you. And, that Saturn-Mars trine is kind of where I went with that.
Yeah, it's so purging and cathartic, isn't it, that hot water?
Catharsis, yes.
Yeah, which is that whole Scorpio ethos. So here is our chart for the second, and we'll look at the other aspects. We've got Mercury here on the second, just entering into Sagittarius. But we know that before Mercury entered Sagittarius, it was at 29 degrees of Scorpio. and it was making its sextile to Pluto. And it was also making its trine to Neptune there, and a trine to Mars, which we discussed with the new moon chart. So we had all of that intensity, and then suddenly it skips across the boundary and enters Sagittarius. And again, the ingresses are important because of like the dignity change, because Mercury has been peregrine in Scorpio, and now it's entering exile or detriment. And we can see this because it's opposite its home sign of Gemini. So in that sense, it's far away from home. And we all know if we go traveling, the further you get from home, the harder it is to manage. You don't have your home comforts. So it's like a traveler in a foreign land. It's got to rely on its resourcefulness and what it might have packed. And the language might be different. And your documents suddenly become much more important. You've got to look after that passport and keep it in a safe or something, and your travel money and things like that you've got to look out for, and learning the language to get by, and whatever skills, maybe if you're deciding to work in a foreign land, you've got to get visas. So it's that kind of energy of there's more you've got to do just to function day to day than you would have in a home sign or in a sign where you're peregrine. So Mercury's going to have to work hard here, which might take some of its energy up. But it is in mutual reception with Jupiter in Gemini. So Jupiter's in Mercury's sign, Mercury is in Jupiter's sign, which I think is quite nice. Kind of means that they're both having some shared goals and aims, and they're kind of supporting each other with that. So whatever Jupiter in Gemini is wanting to do, Mercury in Sagittarius is also here to support that, and vice versa. So we might see an interesting shift with our Jupiter and Gemini story, the social medias and the difficulties people are having, and the need to shift where we advertise ourselves and where we communicate with other people and try to reach our audience and everything. That might change. And also, again, conscious of the dates that it's right before America votes. So there might be information coming through as well that was difficult, withheld, that suddenly can become clear because of this mutual reception and the way that suddenly it's supported to come out into the world. So Jupiter and Gemini is also in exile, so they've got that in common as well. And this is an extended stay for Mercury. He's going to be here until the 8th of January 2025. So it's kind of like, okay, buckle in, get used to this energy. We're going to see it all through Christmas and New Year. This is how it's going to be for quite some time. And Sagittarius is a fire sign, so it's quick acting. It's a yang sign, which is outgoing, and it's also mutable, which means it can change. It can adapt to the seasons. It can be sunny one day and raining 2 hours later. So you don't quite know where you are in the way that you do with the fixed signs. So it's been in fixed Scorpio, and now things are going to change fast for us. You know, we might find that information coming at us thick and fast. You know, in the way that Shawna was talking about how difficult it is to navigate. Around this time, we might find that getting like even more so from the information that comes through when it's at the 29 degrees and it's speaking to the outer planets, those changes, and then suddenly the shift into Sagittarius. So the dates that it's in shadow from the 7th of November, once it reaches 6 degrees of Sagittarius, it will then enter its shadow. And that means that things that are said and done and things that we do ourselves at that time will be going back over when Mercury retrogrades. So we might expect that we'll have to review or redo them. So as astrologers, we often advise people it's not a great time to sign contracts or anything like that. If you can avoid it, it's best to wait until Mercury's out of its shadow again, which won't be until the new year. So we've got quite that extended time. I mean, again, that's if you can avoid it. If it's unavoidable, just make sure you really double check everything. Make sure you know exactly what you're signing up for, because there could be something in that small print that really doesn't suit you, and you need to make sure that you address that before you sign it. That's the best advice. Just be sure of what you're signing. If you're traveling, double check the plans, expect delays, and just allow for it with your timing. That's even more so once it's retrograde. But I found, like, if you're affected by these planets, that once Mercury goes into shadow, I started getting all the effects of the retrograde anyway, because it was in my chart. And then another time there was a retrograde that didn't affect me at all. So sometimes that shadow period can really show up strongly if say, for example, it's squaring your natal Mercury, or Mercury's your Lord of the Year or something. And then another time a Mercury retrograde can come and go and you wouldn't notice a thing. So, I mean, obviously not everybody's affected by all these things all the time. But if you start to notice things go wrong, then pay attention to it. But again, we don't scare everybody. The world doesn't stop. Everything keeps turning. But yeah, just pay that little bit of extra attention. And it's co-present with Venus. So the two start meeting up again. She's still in Sagittarius for the time being until she moves into Capricorn. And she's peregrine, so she doesn't have an awful lot of power. And that means just not able to enact her significations. She's wandering a little bit, but she's not quite as stuck as Mercury is having to work a lot harder. And on a personal note, I'm noticing also that the sun has gone into 10 degrees of Scorpio, which is when my Astrologer's Co-op article will come out on the second decan of Scorpio. So if you want to check that out, the 2nd of November will be, I guess, when it's going to be coming out, which is exciting and very, very scary. So yeah, we've got some aspects there. Mercury's going to be opposing Jupiter, but we think with that mutual reception, that's quite a nice opposition. It's a bit softer than a normal opposition would be. And it's also going to be squaring Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. They're over here. So again, it's with that connection as it moves through Sagittarius, there'll be information coming from those watery signs again. Shawna, what's coming to mind for you as we look at this?
Yeah, I find it really interesting. I mean, with the mutual reception is a positive thing, I mean, in general, but, Mercury lost a little bit of dignity going from Scorpio to Sag. With Jupiter in Gemini, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but what I wonder is you mentioned the election and the voting period, and, we brought that up at the beginning too, but Jupiter, I think in Gemini, has a tendency to widen the mind, not necessarily deepen the mind. And so I wonder if the advertisements and things are going to get bigger and more, and not necessarily, with any additional substance. Hopefully the mutual reception offers that substance for us. And so it's not just superficial fluff, but Venus is there too. And hopefully she can, grab Mercury by the hand and say, let's go. But she's moving quick. She's moving so quickly. I think Saturn's going to have a much bigger effect on Mercury this time around than anything. So in this particular chart, when this aspect actually hits, we've got Saturn up in the 9th, which is wonderful. A little bit of higher education and maybe a little more. I always think of like courts and universities and regulations and things like that when I think of the 9th house. So I hope that influence sticks with it and really draws some things out for us in that respect. I also can't help but think if we bring the decans into it, Mercury in the first decan, I had to look because I couldn't recall, but the 8 of Wands, there's a lot of quick movement is what it looks like. And the corresponding cards are the Magician, which is what made me giggle, and Temperance. So I think Temperance folding in beautifully with the 9th house aspect there, but the Magician, just Mercury all over the place. You're much better at the phases than I am at this point. Do you know what phase Mercury will be in when he makes this move?
Yeah, I think he's in the trickster phase at the moment. And then he goes into the messenger phase once he starts the retrograde.
Yeah, and that'll be shortly after elections too. So this just feels very full circle, not to bring the elections into it again, but it's a hot topic right now too.
Yeah, with Mercury in the trickster phase, it's like playing those jokes on us, so we might see that very much more.
Yeah,
no, I like that, bring the Magician and Temperance into it as well, because that is Jupiter's ability in Sagittarius, isn't it? Bringing things together and creating order out of them. And the way that Temperance is creating like that higher sense of something quite beautiful, and with Venus there as well. That's quite reassuring. I like that.
hanging out.
Yeah. And of course, at the same time, we've got that Mars-Pluto that we said we'd mention. So that's just still applying. I think it's like in the next day or two, it's going to be exact. But yeah,
That's the 3rd.
That's quite a big deal. But yeah, once Pluto goes into Aquarius and Mars goes into Leo, they'll make that aspect again sort of 2 or 3 times. So we'll kind of get the energy from water and earth, and then we'll get fire and air making the same kind of aspect. And yeah, this can be about showing us things like from our, not necessarily our subconscious, but our unconscious, because we're not meant to access things from our subconscious by definition, but there are things from our higher self and our unconscious that we can access. And those are the things that we can become aware of, particularly in these kind of aspects, particularly Mars in a watery sign, bringing it through, particularly in dreams and intuitions, things like that to watch out for. And that's like the nice version of it. And the more unpleasant shadow side of that is like a lot of anger and everything rising to the surface, the potential for aggression to rise. Would you agree? That's lean into like, what are you being shown? What is coming from your, because when we can lean into our shadow side and accept it, we can integrate ourselves as a whole person. None of us are sugar and spice and all things nice. We've all got those shadow sides, and we become a better person for understanding that and integrating it and living with it and working with it, rather than pushing it down and just giving a persona that isn't real, putting that mask on. So this is a great opportunity to lean into some of those things that are being shown maybe we don't want to admit about ourselves. And then it's about, how do we react to that? Do we react with aggression, or do we act with watery intuition and kindness to ourselves and also to others around us? Because it's not just us experiencing it. There's people whose charts it will impact directly who will be more affected by it. So we've got to be aware that it's affecting the collective as well, and show some kindness to people who are being more affected than we are, maybe, if we're lucky enough to not be very impacted.
I feel like with the Mars retrograde that's going to take place, we've got some time to work some stuff out.
Yeah.
I feel like Mars in Cancer gets kind of softened, and then he gets a chance to gain a little bit of dignity when he moves back into Leo, back into fire, and find the heat. I feel like it's almost kind of indicative of that. You're speaking about acknowledging the shadow side, and it's like when you have a rough day, you come home and everybody at home needs everything from you, and you just kind of lose your temper, you get frustrated, or, that's when you shout at someone that you didn't really mean to shout at, and then you're able to take 5 minutes, regroup yourself, and come back. I feel like this is kind of demonstrative. This retrograde cycle is demonstrative of that kind of a jump rope where you get that few minutes to recoup and resolve internally what's going on, what happened, and then Mars goes back into Cancer, and maybe that's where you make your apologies because you lost your temper. And that, when Mars goes back into Leo, you've learned that lesson. Hopefully, I'm staring at 29 degrees again, but you've learned that lesson, and you can remember that the next time you had that rough day or something challenged you and you're close to losing your temper, and what the results were the last time you did it.
Yeah, that's so true. I always think of Mars in Cancer being like without his armor and being that more defensive side. And it's, when we're defensive, we can say things we don't mean when we're trying to defend a position that we actually maybe do we even believe in. So it is about reflecting, what are we defending and why? And is it the right thing? Do we still believe in it? And certainly making amends with everybody if we have messed up, or when we mess up, because we're human, so we will.
There's almost an anticipation with Mars at 29 Cancer, looking forward to gaining that dignity back, even though Mars is peregrine at that point, but being able to maybe pick up the sword again, as opposed to walking around feeling a little aimless, or, looking forward to being able to embrace the passion again, or something like that.
Yeah, and just ready to take some action, where he's been sort of in this receptive place, which in Scorpio he's receptive as well, but it just feels like he's struggling a bit more with it in Cancer.
There's movement in the water in Cancer, where there's not in Scorpio. It's a lot easier to tread water when it's still. If it's stormy water, it's a lot harder to know which way is up and maintain, and to also keep the energy.
Yeah, it's been a rough time. It's been hard for him to help us to do what we need to do, hard for him to enact his significations, and therefore hard for us to keep our motivation. A lot of people have heard people talking about feeling more tired and lacking motivation and energy, and it's like Mars is in Cancer. Hopefully that will change once Mars gets to Leo. Wait it out.
But we're not done yet, so
you might get a little boost of energy, and then it's going to go again. It's going to retrograde back. But it's a long old journey, and just try and learn what you can while it does. Learn about what rest you need as well, and your routines, what's draining you of energy that's being brought to your attention right now, whether it's the people around you and your family, or, what you're eating, your diet, whatever it is that's around you that's not helping you with your energy. That's what Mars is showing up for us. We have Mars entering Leo, so we've already started talking about that a fair bit. Couldn't help it seeing Mars at 29. So Mars enters Leo on the 4th in the UK. What is it? 4. So that would be 4:09 a.m. So it might be a different time or day in the US. And the Sun is trining Saturn on the same day. So yeah, that's interesting. The Sun in Scorpio has the trine to Saturn on the same day. So Mars is leaving its fall and moving into Leo, which is fixed and solid. So Mars is used to that energy because it's got a fixed sign of Scorpio that it rules. It's Yang, which is outgoing energy, and it's fire. So although Mars doesn't have specific dignity, its peregrine here is a wanderer, it is more aligned to energy that Mars is more comfortable with than when it was in full. And it also has dignity as the lord of the last decan, but it won't get there until June of next year because of the retrogrades back into Cancer. So we've got a while until it gets that dignity of having the last decan of Leo. And it will be in its shadow. It has been in its shadow since the 5th of October, 17 degrees of Cancer. So we might have found that things feel difficult and harder, and we might find the action that we've taken, that we will be going back and reviewing it and changing it. There may have been setbacks. It's not a great time for initiating new things, generally. It is a time to, I suppose, lean into our feelings and our relationships while Mars has been in Cancer. But now, while Mars is doing that direct in Leo, we can take some actions, but just know that you may be returning to them, depending on how it hits your chart. Again, it's not for everybody, but it's likely it will affect some people that you know. It will return to Cancer on the 6th of January, 2025. So we're here in Leo now till the end of the year, and for about 2 months, and then it will return to Leo on the 18th of April. So we've kind of got an introduction to how it's going to be. And then in April, it will be going nice and direct over the same degrees, and we'll be able to get some forward motion going until it gets out of the shadow. We'll be reviewing some of these things, but at least we know that Mars will be traveling direct and picking up some speed. It'll station direct in Cancer at 17 degrees, and that will be on the 24th of February 25. So it gives us some feeling of the timeline. We're looking at quite a long timeline as opposed to a Mercury retrograde, which is a lot shorter. It's just a few weeks. When it leaves its shadow, it'll be opposing Pluto in Aquarius, which I think is quite interesting. So we've already been talking about the Pluto opposition from Cancer to Capricorn. And when it leaves its shadow, it will be meeting Pluto in Aquarius. So there will be that different story from the Cancer-Capricorn story that we've got now. It'll be a different story, the Leo and Aquarius one. So Mars is squaring the Sun in Scorpio, and it's squaring Uranus in Taurus. So it's got that information coming from the Sun. So that's a nice mutual reception we have there from Mars in the Sun sign and the Sun in Mars's sign. So again, that's a combination of topics that they're working on, and a support there from the Sun to Mars and Mars to the Sun. And then the square to Uranus in Taurus, another fixed sign, but where Uranus is trying to disrupt things a little bit more. And then it's trine Mercury, newly moved into Sagittarius, trining the moon on the ingress, because we look at the ingress chart as carrying the energy forward of the time. So this is the time until the new year that it's carrying forward. So it's got that trine there to the moon. So there's still some feelings coming through there from the moon in fiery Sagittarius, matching the fire of Leo, really, and a sextile to Jupiter in Gemini. So that's there. What do you think of this chart, Shawna? Given everything we've said before.
It was a nice flow, actually, talking about that, 10 degrees moving into Leo. I think that Mars Sun square is interesting. It will get just a little bit of relief, Mars Pluto, but I don't think that's going to last. I think the dynamic definitely changed, though, on that second pass when Mars makes it back to Leo. Yeah. That should be interesting. Again, I don't think it's a bad thing. I've joked with you privately about Pluto being, like a big brother to me. It's it's okay for Pluto to pick on me, but if anyone else does, it's not happening. I'm excited about Pluto moving into Aquarius, but yeah, the applying square from Uranus too. Feels like Mars has got some work cut out. I don't know why, but Mars has definitely got some work cut out. I think the full moon in Taurus in the third week, it's 2 degrees away from the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction from April. I started thinking of
That's good.
there's something interesting there.
Yeah, because of course Mars won't make that square by degree yet. It's just catching the whole sign energy of it at the moment. And yeah, by next year, I'll have to check if Mars actually makes that square, because Uranus might have moved by the time Mars gets to 25 of Leo, the late degrees of Leo.
Yeah, because Mars won't leave until June
Yeah.
next year. Is that right? Yeah, so he's bound to connect with Uranus at some point. I don't recall when Uranus stations, but
yeah,
because they're so far, they go retrograde. The Mars Moon trine is interesting. That just caught my eye.
Yeah, and I suppose it's trining all of them, isn't it? Mercury, Moon, and Venus for the energy of the ingress chart. It's in a degree-based trine with Mercury, but it's nice that it's got like the benefic energy. And the Moon and Venus, they're just cheerleading on a little bit. Trines are of the nature of Jupiter. They bring ease and opportunities through. So that's nice when you see a connection with benefic planets.
Actually got a Jupiter, Venus exact opposition.
Well, that's just slightly separating, is it? Because Jupiter's retrograde.
Yeah, just now.
Yeah, so Jupiter's moving into that. Yeah, so that's a nice energy to bring into the Mars ingress, isn't it? That you've got Venus and Jupiter connected in that way. Even though it's in opposition, so there might be some tension.
You said some nice things about the benefics before. I only noticed it because I was looking for any kind of enclosure or anything. I don't see one.
Yeah, so it's just nice to have that energy of the benefics talking to each other and bringing that into the Moon and Mercury as well. Of course, Mercury and Jupiter are still in that mutual reception, so that's helping all of these planets that Mercury's co-present with. And then Venus comes into the conversation with her opposition with Jupiter. But we do like when Venus and Jupiter connects, it's the two benefic planets, so it's usually good things, but it may come with a challenge with an opposition. They are the nature of Saturn, so a lesson or a challenge or some work might be needed to get to the reward that's being offered. One of my teachers once spoke about a lady that he was reading for, and she had a Jupiter-Venus connection in her chart. And she'd been offered her dream job, but she said the timing wasn't right. And he was trying to get across to her that nothing's ever totally perfect. And when you get an offer from Jupiter, quite often you need to be at the door with your coat on and your bag and your keys ready to go and accept the opportunity, that things aren't always going to be perfect for it, but are you ready to accept? So when this offer comes up, don't be like the Five of Cups looking at the problems with it. Look at the opportunity. So she was saying, oh, maybe next year would be better. And he was like, well, you won't have this aspect next year. That opportunity may not come around again. I can't guarantee it. You've got this Jupiter aspect in your chart this year and your solar return. I can't remember exactly how it was showing up for her. But he was like, this is your year. This is the year that Jupiter's bringing you these opportunities. And even though it's not perfect, you need to be at that door ready to grab the opportunity. And I think that's what we see with the opposition, that it's not going to be perfect, but something might be offered that's still great, and don't be focusing on the difficulties and the things that aren't perfect, because this is something great. If this is hitting your chart in any way, go for it, because that's the one thing where astrology can help, is just to know that. So this is the Virgo, Gemini, Pisces and Sagittarius, that those opportunities might be coming for you. Yeah, particularly around this time, around the 4th of November. Don't worry too much about the difficulties, particularly if they're not too small or it's going to require a little bit of effort to get it organised. Take that leap, do the thing. It's your time. And yeah, just know that it's not all going to be perfect, I think is what that's saying. Would you agree?
You're totally right. The nature of Saturn. So if things aren't just right, that's too bad. You're going to have to take the chance, grab your parachute and jump, take the leap, and it'll open. Have faith. That's what has to happen right now, is probably more faith than you're used to having, but it'll work out.
Yeah. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, Jupiter's the planet of faith, and he asks us to have faith in him, trust his wisdom. Okay, so that completes the week of the 31st to the 6th of November. And Shawna and I will be back with you next Wednesday, and we'll be covering the 6th to the 13th. So thank you so much for joining us. Please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. It really helps us to know to keep going and to keep producing this content for you. And Shawna, do you want to remind everybody where to find you?
Yeah, available for booking, smartastro.com. SmartAstro is the handle on all the media. So the Instagram, X, Blue Sky, Substack. Yeah, can't wait to hear from you.
Yeah. So if you like the way Shawna talks about astrology or the way I talk about astrology, we're both available for readings, and you can find me at celestiaastrology.com. Thanks for joining us.